once something, either a business model or product doesn't have a market or the business model isn't going to work, just move on, change, pivot, as quick as you can. I wouldn't say give up on the vision ever, but uh, and I'm not, don't overreact.
Right.
Reaction is never a good thing in business.
Well, Brad, thank you for coming on today. I think your story about, you've been such a prolific entrepreneur. I think now's a good time. Everybody needs to hear a really good entrepreneurial story, and Lord knows you've got that. And so, I appreciate you taking the time.
Happy to be here, Joe. I really appreciate you thinking of me. I hope I
Yeah,
can contribute.
yeah. Well, I think our viewers, they want to hear a good story right now. There's a lot of negative stuff in the news all the time, so I think this is something that can really motivate them to get out there and do their thing. And so now let's kind of give them a history of the companies that you built. I know you've got Inman.com you built up. You got Climate Check. You've got three or four other companies, correct?
Yeah, I started a whole bunch of companies. Started with Bucket and Brush Brothers in Carlinville, Illinois, when I was 10 years old. I rallied my brother and my buddies, and we cleaned windows for $1 per store. That didn't go very well. I learned right on, don't ever go into business with family and friends. That'd be a warning as an entrepreneur. It's just too complicated. Relationships are complicated enough. But on the serious side, I was a journalist, and the first thing I did is syndicated my column. I watched my father as a retailer have to buy all the products that he sold, and then he had to wait and wait and wait to after he paid for them. He was the last paid, kind of like a realtor is, Joe. They're the last paid. They go through a long sales cycle. So I realized I could write one newspaper column and I could sell it. I actually sold it to 200 different newspapers, and so that was my first foray. As I always wanted to be a creator and a content creator, never wanted to give that up, but I also had this headache from being this incredible entrepreneur, ambition and spirit. So I was able to combine those right away. And then through that experience in the beginning of the age of the internet and digital media, I sold a big database to Microsoft. And then I got involved with Microsoft's Home Advisor. I chaired that group and helped launch that. And then launched Inman News around the advent of the internet, kind of the dawn of the internet, and created that company. And then I started a company called Home Gain, which was an online real estate company, really the first venture back with the likes of TCV and Mark Andreessen. Sold that company. It was the first successful exit in online real estate in 2005. Just a great, wonderful success story. Learned right away during that experience to hire better, hire people that are twice as smart as me, and half my age. And I hired a lot of great people, and really helped me do quite well. I then started an internet video platform, an ebook company, and then, as you said, I dabbled in climate change with something called Climate Check, but that was post me selling in the news 2 years ago this summer. And now I'm sitting in Paris, and there's the church that I stare at. I come here and read my book. So
Yeah.
I was a guy that worked, 20 hours a day. Not kidding you, many, many days, and slept in the office. And I think I outworked most people around me, which is, when I really look back, I think one of the keys to success is working really hard. I don't know how else to do it.
Yeah.
Um, but that's a quick summary. I did a lot of other stuff in the middle of all that, but that's a quick summary.
I know you did. Yeah, it's that founder energy is something that's hard to replicate. How did you, when you were hiring, what did you look for? What did you find the most key thing was when you were hiring your executives?
Well, one thing I did is, I didn't always do this, but successfully, and the most successful companies that I launched, Joe, as I hired people from the best universities and people who had a great academic background. And it didn't always work out. I hired guys from Harvard I had to fire, but so I'm not overplaying that. But there was something to say for someone who, at a young age, had succeeded and had ambition and got into a great university. It also said something about how smart they were. And one thing I learned right away, all of my companies were digital first, meaning kind of the conversion from paper to digital. And so you need pretty smart people that understand the big picture dynamics. But I would say of all the employees I hired, I didn't hire them all from these great Ivy League schools. I look for attitude and energy and commitment and loyalty and just old fashioned values. And that worked well. I hired thousands of people, and I'm really grateful for the crowd of people I worked with. Just amazing teams in all of these companies.
Yeah, it's really hard to, as a founder, to find somebody that can come in and really have the focus that you have. And so it seems like you've done that several times over. How did you start? Did you have a mentor that you learned from, or did you come from an entrepreneurial family?
Entrepreneurial family, very much so. My mother, in particular, taught me to sell. She was raised very poor. Her father, she had 10 siblings, and they went through 7 crop failures. And just to give you what that means, it means you didn't have income for 7 years with a family of 10. They roamed around the Midwest trying to find, they were basically sharecroppers. That's not what they called them in Illinois. And in those places, it was corn and beans and cattle and pigs and chickens. But so she was given up by her family, and when she got on our feet again and married my father, she knew what it was like to be hungry. And so when someone would walk into our little, store in Carlinville, Illinois, she would always presume everyone was going to buy from her because she needed them to. So
Yeah.
she would tell me, Bradley, when Mrs. Lusk comes in, she's walking down the sidewalk. She'd look out the window. She goes, she's going to open her purse before she leaves. And she was a presumptive closer. So that entrepreneuring bug came from my mother and my dad. My dad was a little more dignified about it all, but my mom was a hustler, and I always was as well. And looking back, probably could have done it differently, but I learning that from my mom was the most important thing. And I just, I think there's an entrepreneuring gene, and in that gene, the composition of that gene, Joe, is someone that's willing to take a risk, kind of bet it all, and do that when you're young because you have nothing to lose. I'm more careful now. I spend way too much time talking to lawyers and accountants to protect what I created. Back in the day, I probably crossed a few lines. I don't think I ever committed fraud, but you have more guts and you have no intuition. You think you do. That comes with age, but yeah, it was always in. But I was always a content creator. I always believed and loved journalism because I did it for so long.
Yeah, I know you come from the Midwest as I do, and you grow up in that community, and all those farmers and everybody servicing them, pretty entrepreneurial. So I think it just gets ingrained into your blood. Now, this is if you were when you were doing your startups, Brad, and Lord knows you've done enough of them to know. Did you just say, "Here's my idea," and take off, or did you come up with the idea, talk to several people about it, take meetings, get a better understanding of it, and then start to build it?
Yeah, mine was always very iterative, and this is pre the stage of entrepreneurship. I mean, I worked with Microsoft for a couple of years, and I saw that long programmatic product cycle, very
Sure.
disciplined and detailed. I would say that wasn't Brad Inman. I put out quick and dirty products and iterated, more like you saw, the Zuckerberg area. But
Yeah.
previous to that, because I was so anxious, every product, again, back to my mother, she thought people could buy everything she sold. And I thought every idea I had was absolutely going to go viral and go crazy. I was lucky enough to have that happen a couple times, and it made me a lot of money. But I probably introduced 30, 40 products that didn't go viral,
Yeah.
and most of them don't. But I had such an abundance of confidence that I wanted to launch. And one of the mistakes I made is I launched products prematurely. I had it turned out to be a really good idea for ebooks, integrating video and words. And in the process of doing that, I slapped together a product because the New York Times picked up on the idea and they wrote a story about it. And I went to some big publishers with an inferior product that really didn't work. And someone was able to look behind and see the code. The idea was good, but the presentation was pretty poor.
Right.
It worked. It was unique and different. There's nothing like it, but it wasn't something a big mainstream publisher that's conservative. Now, later we got it right and all the publishers signed up. We had a home run overnight. But, I look back and I'm kind of embarrassed. I never forget a meeting I had with, I think it was Random House, and a very savvy tech woman figured out what we were doing. And, it wasn't like Theranos, it wasn't fraud, but it was, we said it's a beta, and she realized we hadn't made much progress beyond the ideas. So I think looking back, I would have still scrambled to get product out, but I would have been a little not as conservative as Microsoft back in the day,
Right.
and still be iterative. But I would hold off before I presented something, make sure I have it right.
Yeah.
And
How did you know?
it never really hurt me, Joe. It just
Right.
embarrassed me, to be honest.
Well, yeah. You know, as an entrepreneur, we see a lot of them out there, and they keep going and going and going on a product, and they think this is it, this is it, when in fact it's just not going to go anywhere. At what
Yeah,
point?
that Joe, that's so important. You know, you just
Yeah,
gotta, the whole idea of a sunk cost, just walk away from it.
yeah,
And but and I was lucky. I pivoted several times in all my businesses, and it saved me because usually it's the business plan, not the product. My products were always premature. They were way before their time, and
yeah,
I should have waited 10 years in some of them, but um, and it wasn't so some genius that saw the future. It's just things were coming together. They're pretty obvious to people, particularly where I was in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was pursuing those aggressively. But I could have waited a little bit. But once something, either a business model or product, doesn't have a market, or the business model isn't going to work, just move on, change, pivot as quick as you can. I wouldn't say give up on the vision ever, but and don't overreact.
right.
Reaction is never a good thing in business. But when you're absolutely sure, it's kind of like my dad used to say, when everybody's telling you the same thing, Bradley, they're probably right and you're probably wrong. And I think all of my executives were telling me, and I was
Yeah,
pretty demonstrative back in the day. I wasn't very mellow then, and so they didn't. But I had smart enough people who were together. One of my operators who was with me for a couple of companies, he used to say, "You got to have the confidence to stand up to Brad, and the self assurance to follow him when it makes sense." And that's those people telling me how crazy I was and wrong I was really important, because you can't do this alone. Two heads are better than one, three are better than two, and four are better than three.
yeah, yeah. It's when George and I were starting a company. I don't know if you remember Fred Sands Realtors here in Los
Oh
Angeles.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I
great
started.
company.
Oh yeah, he Fred gave George and I a chance. We were in our late 20s and starting an auction company. And George had
Oh
laid me
wow.
off from a big company, Kennedy Wilson. He got to lay me off, and then he got laid off. So he called me up and goes, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Okay, you can come here. We'll partner. We'll grow this company for Fred." And we took that auction company to be the number 2 auction company in the Western region within 18 months. But Brad, I got down to $1,200 in my account. And I was like,
Yeah,
what am I going to do? And
yeah,
fortunately, the next day, we got a call from a big company. Goes, okay, we're going to do this auction with you guys. If it does well, then we'll go on. But there's a lot of sleepless nights. I sit there thinking, how am I going to pay my rent next month? And I got very, very lucky. And I just don't want anybody to think, you've got to know when to pull the plug. And I probably should have pulled the plug a couple months before, but it was really my first entrepreneurial venture. It was scary, very scary.
yeah. On the other hand, um, I couldn't agree more with that. And those sleepless nights, I don't miss those. And I had so many in my career, because if I'm painting a picture somehow that this is all beautifully wonderful, magical, and fantastic, there were so many more times that it wasn't so difficult. Economic
Yeah.
downturns like now, just a horrible experience. But one time I almost walked away. I'll never forget. I had home gain. We got through the knothole of the dot-com crash. We're doing okay. But Barry Diller came to us about the time he bought Lending Tree, and it turned out he wound up buying Lending Tree instead of HomeGain. And we were right down to the finish line in diligence. They were all over our office. We're about ready to close a deal. I was going to sell HomeGain. Everybody's going to make a fair amount of money, and I was pretty excited. And it fell apart. And I never forget. I went to my son Cal's graduation from USC, and there was my ex-wife Chris, who a dear friend, and she was partners with the venture. And I took a walk with her, and she was from the Midwest, and she had really great kind of traditional Midwestern values. And I said, Chris, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to walk away from home game. I'm done. And she said, that's fine, because she was always so supportive. But somehow through that weekend, I got another, something in me that said, don't give up. And I wound up, firing the CEO, going back, running the company, had a couple of really smart product managers that made their tweaks. And 18 months, Joe, we sold it for twice what Barry Diller was going to pay me. It was life-changing financially. I mean, I'd done okay up until that point, but it done well actually. But after many sleepless nights and no money in the bank account, but that was really, and so there was an example where I was winded. And in fact, the biggest mistakes I ever made in my career as an entrepreneur was probably in some cases, hiring CEOs and walking away and letting them run the show, thinking that, as I say, every company has a point in its history where the person running it is not qualified to take it to the next level. Some people can take it to 5, some 10, some 20, some 100, some to 1 billion. And I think there's a profile of each of those people. And so I was always trying to gauge that. And but it's a good thing I didn't walk away. It's a good thing that I doubled down, made some hard decisions about firing, and because it really, 18 months later, twice the price. And that's the other thing about all of this. We're in a bad window now. There is no window open to seemingly do anything, raise money, sell companies, do anything. To all your listeners, don't give up, because the window will open up again, for M&A. The window will open up for raising money. The window will open up for more business and more clients. It always does. It will this time. And you just got to hang in there, particularly if you have a business that works and you have at least 60% confidence. And I used to always tell my financial guys when we present a plan to the board, do we have 80% confidence in this plan? And try to come up with your own metrics. And if anything has an 80% chance of happening, then stick to it. And I could give people all kinds of ways to do those metrics, but I stuck to that my whole career. If it had an 80% chance, then there it was.
That's good.
Hey, my last piece of advice, I noticed the church bells just ringing. We agreed the first time they rang.
Yep.
The other thing that I learned is, because I love my product so much and I love my team too so much, I was too defensive about them. And I'll never forget, I was with Jared Simon, who went on to start Hotel Tonight. In fact, the family of people I worked with over the years, they went on and did so many great things. But Jared was a co-founder of Hotel Tonight, and he and I were at Book, at Turn Here, the video company. And we were selling video profiles to publishers. And we walked into Simon & Schuster, as typical publisher meeting, 25 people in a big table in a big conference room. And a woman who turned out to be our number one ally asked, not a question, she made a statement, basically criticizing our product, criticizing our company, questioning its value, questioning its integrity. And of course, Brad's natural reaction at that time was to get defensive and counter it, which is not what you should do, Joe. And no. Jarrett knew what I was going to do. He gave me a good kick to the shin, and he looked her straight in the eye and he said, "Sue, that was an amazing question." And she became our biggest ally. So that's my last piece of advice. Don't be defensive like Brad was.
I'm guilty of that too, though, Brad, because it's your baby, right? And, you kind of think that you're not just cutting this company down, you're cutting me down. So, but in closing, Brad, what's next for you?
Right now, it's I bought a house in Paris. I'm lucky I bought a lot of real estate over the years. Again, I started with nothing. Nothing was given to me. I'm not an aristocrat, but I'm hanging out here and getting to know Paris, and I'm reading and writing. I write a lot now. I read a lot. I go to museums, and that's kind of what's next. And supporting Climate Check, and a new venture is called Found, which is, you're all going to read about it soon. The guys that helped me put together the growth plan for Inman and then help sell it, Josh Alberson, Lockhart Steele, two of the brightest digital media people on the planet, are building this thing called Found. We raised a bunch of money, and it's basically the next generation of digital media for luxury, without using that word. It's for a new generation of wealthy people, and aspirationally wealthy people that want to find the greatest things and places and all that. So I'm not active in anything. I'm a fan for the companies I invest in. Well,
you've built a bunch of great companies, and you deserve this success. And thank you for taking the time today.
Hey, Joe, great to chat with you. You asked great questions. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you. And for those of you watching, make sure you give us a like. And if you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe.